The girl lived in a small, run-down neighborhood where the buildings were cracked and the streets were dusty. She often walked along those streets, carrying a small bag with a few belongings. Her home was quiet and sometimes cold, but she had learned to be strong. Life had taught her to keep her feelings hidden, except when she played the piano in her small room. That was the only time she felt free, like the world around her disappeared, and only the music existed. She would sit on the old bench, her fingers brushing the keys softly at first. Then faster as the notes became a story she could tell without speaking. Music had always been her escape. She learned it from herself, listening to the sounds that came naturally to her. She never had lessons or guidance, only curiosity and determination. At night, when everyone else slept, she practiced quietly, careful not to wake anyone. The neighbors thought she was just a normal girl living a hard life, but no one knew about the melodies she created. Melodies that carried her dreams, her hopes, and sometimes her sadness. One day, a local community center organized an event. People from the neighborhood were invited to participate. It was supposed to be a fun gathering, with performances and activities. The girl did not want to attend. She did not enjoy crowds or attention, and she certainly did not want strangers to see her. But her caretaker, who watched over her sometimes, insisted. They told her she should join and try to perform something. She shook her head quietly, hoping they would forget, but they were persistent. When she arrived at the event, the room was filled with families, children, and local organizers. There were tables with decorations and laughter filled the air. She felt out of place. Her clothes were simple, her hair tied back in a plain way, and she could feel the eyes of strangers noticing her. Some looked down at her. Some whispered to each other. She kept her head low, trying to disappear into the crowd. Then someone pointed to the piano in the corner. It was a large piano, shiny and polished, unlike the one she had at home. The people organizing the event suggested she sit down and play. At first, she shook her head and tried to walk away, but they insisted, some of them with smiles that felt more like pressure than encouragement. A few children looked at her, curious. The whispers of adults grew louder, some with doubts, some with playful teasing. She could feel her face heating up, a mixture of fear and anger. She hesitated, her small hands trembling as she approached the piano. She did not want to perform, did not want anyone to judge her, but the crowd watched, and there was no other choice. She sat on the bench, her heart pounding. The piano felt cold beneath her fingers, its polished surface reflecting the faces in front of her. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. Her fingers hovered over the keys, unsure at first, and the room felt heavy with silence. Everyone waited, some with curiosity, some with expectation, some with doubt. She pressed a single key, and the note echoed softly. It sounded different from what she expected, strange in the large hall compared to her small room. She tried again, more carefully, finding a rhythm that felt natural to her. Slowly, the music began to flow. It was quiet at first, hesitant, like a small stream beginning to trickle. She closed her eyes and let her fingers move, letting the sounds express what she could not say in words. The crowd was surprised. No one expected anything special, yet there was something in the notes that felt different. It was not just playing. It was emotion, a story being told through music. She played with a kind of honesty that touched those listening. The laughter faded, replaced by soft murmurs. Some adults leaned forward, unsure of what they were hearing, and some children watched with wide eyes. The girl felt a mix of fear and courage. She had not planned to show her talent, yet here she was, revealing a part of herself that she had kept hidden for so long. The music grew stronger, more confident. Each note carried a feeling she could not contain. Memories of hardship, of long nights alone, of dreams she had never shared, all seemed to pour out through her hands. She did not notice the expressions around her, did not think about how people might react. The piano became a bridge between her inner world and the outside. And for the first time in a long time, she felt truly seen, even if it was just through the music. When she finally stopped, the room was silent for a moment. The sudden quiet made her heart race. Then, slowly, the applause began, first hesitant, then stronger. Some people stood up, clapping and smiling. some wiping their eyes, moved by what they had just heard. She opened her eyes and looked at the crowd. There were no more whispers of doubt, only faces that seemed surprised, impressed, and even a little guilty for underestimating her. She stood up from the piano, feeling both exhausted and proud. The music had done what words could not. It had told her story, her feelings, and her strength. She realized that even though she had been forced into that moment, she had taken control through her talent. The pressure, which had felt so unbearable at first, had led her to a truth she had not shared with anyone before. The crowd had expected a mistake or embarrassment, but instead, I think they witnessed something rare and beautiful. After the event, people approached her offering praise and admiration. Some asked if she had formal training, and she smiled softly, shaking her head. She had learned by herself, through practice and patience, through the desire to express herself. She felt proud, not because of the attention, but because she had discovered that her music could reach others in a way nothing else could. She understood that her talent was powerful, and it did not belong to anyone else. That day marked a change. She returned home with a sense of confidence she had never felt before. The piano in her room seemed different now, no longer just a place to practice in secret, but a tool that could connect her to the world. She realized that being forced into a situation did not always mean losing control. Sometimes it could reveal hidden strengths, and she had learned that she could face fear and turn it into something remarkable. From that day on, she continued to play, not just for herself, but knowing that her music had the power to touch hearts and open eyes. The girl had discovered that even in moments of pressure and fear, there was the chance for brilliance to shine, and that brilliance was hers alone. After the performance at the community event, the girl returned home with a mixture of relief and confusion. The applause and admiration had been unexpected, and she could not stop replaying the moment in her mind. She thought about how she had felt the weight of all those eyes on her, how her fingers had trembled at first, and how suddenly the music had taken over. That memory stayed with her, even as she went about her quiet life, sweeping the floor, organizing her few belongings. In preparing simple meals, she realized that the crowd had seen something in her that she herself had only felt in private. The music had revealed her inner world in a way words could not. For the first time, she understood that her talent was not just a secret comfort, but a gift that could reach others. This thought both thrilled and frightened her. She liked the idea that her music could matter, but she did not want the attention that came with it. She had grown used to being unnoticed, to walking the streets and blending into the background. Now she felt exposed, as if the world had peeked into her private life and seen something sacred the next day. She went about her routine as if nothing had happened, yet she felt different. Her neighbors began to talk in whispers, some glancing toward her with new interest. A few children from the neighborhood ran up to her, asking if she would play again. She shook her head, unsure how to respond. She wanted to play, yes, but only on her own terms. She needed time to process what had happened and to decide what she wanted from this newfound attention. Despite her hesitation, invitations began to arrive. People asked her to perform at small gatherings, local schools, and community events. At first, she declined every offer. She was afraid of failing in front of a larger audience, afraid that the praise she had received once might not come again. She worried that her music would be judged, criticized, or misunderstood. She did not yet trust herself to face the pressure of expectation. At home, she spent hours at the piano replaying the music from the event. She experimented with new melodies, building confidence in her own style. She discovered that she could express complex emotions through rhythm and harmony, and that her fingers seemed to remember things she did not consciously plan. Each note became a reflection of her life, her struggles, her hopes, and the small joys she found each day. Slowly, her fear began to transform into something else: determination. She realized that she could face the outside world through her music, but only if she prepared herself and understood her own limits. One evening, as she played, her caretaker watched quietly from the doorway. The caretaker had seen her shy and withdrawn moments before, but now there was a subtle strength in her movements, a confidence in the way she pressed each key. Without interrupting, the caretaker nodded once, a silent acknowledgement that the girl was changing, growing into a presence that could not be ignored. The girl did not look up, but she felt the approval, and it gave her a small, quiet courage. The next opportunity came sooner than she expected. A small school nearby invited her to perform during a student assembly. The idea of standing in front of a group of students made her nervous, but she remembered the way the music had carried her through the previous event. She realized that if she focused on the music rather than the crowd, she might find a way to navigate the fear. She agreed, on the condition that she could play her own compositions and that the environment would be friendly and supportive. When the day arrived, she entered the school auditorium, her heart racing. She noticed the rows of students and teachers staring at her, bright lights on the stage, and the polished piano waiting for her. She felt the familiar tension rising in her chest. But she also felt the music calling her, a quiet, insistent reminder that this was her domain. Taking a deep breath, she walked toward the piano and sat down, her fingers hovering over the keys. At first the notes were cautious, each one deliberate. She played softly, testing the sound, listening to the echoes in the auditorium. She felt the eyes on her, but she focused on the rhythm, the melody, the feelings she wanted to share. Gradually her confidence grew, and the music began to flow naturally, stronger and more expressive than before. It was as if the piano was an extension of her thoughts, and each note told a story of struggle, hope, and resilience. The students were quiet, captivated by the unexpected depth of the music. Teachers exchanged surprised glances, realizing that they were witnessing something rare and powerful. The girl's playing was not just skillful, it was honest and emotional, something that could not be taught. As the final notes lingered in the air, a gentle silence followed before the room erupted in applause. The girl looked up briefly, surprised by the warmth and enthusiasm she received. It was different from the earlier event. This time, the appreciation felt personal and genuine. After the performance, some students approached her, asking questions about her music. They were curious about how she learned, how she practiced, and what inspired her melodies. She answered softly, choosing her words carefully, and found that sharing a little about her process did not diminish the magic of the music. She realized that her gift could inspire others, that her story could give hope to those who faced challenges similar to her own. Over the following weeks, she continued to perform at various small events, slowly gaining recognition in her community. Each performance strengthened her confidence, but she remained humble and focused on her music rather than the attention it brought. She discovered that people were not only drawn to her talent, but also to the honesty and emotion she conveyed through her playing. The music became a bridge between her world and the outside, allowing her to communicate without fear, without words, and without compromise. At home, she continued to practice diligently, experimenting with different styles and compositions. She began to keep a notebook, jotting down melodies, rhythms, and ideas. Her small room became a sanctuary, a place where she could refine her craft and explore the depths of her creativity. She understood that talent alone was not enough. Dedication, practice, and self-awareness were equally important. Each day, she pushed herself to improve, not for the approval of others, but to honor the gift she had discovered within herself. The girl also began to notice changes in how others treated her. Neighbors who once ignored her now nodded politely or offered kind words. Children who once played without regard for her presence now watched with curiosity and admiration. Even those who had doubted her abilities began to show respect. She did not seek these changes, but she recognized that her perseverance and talent were reshaping the way the world saw her. Despite the growing recognition, she remained cautious. She knew that attention could be fleeting and that not everyone would understand or appreciate her music. She learned to protect her own sense of self, balancing public performances with private practice. She discovered that the joy of music came not from applause or approval, but from the act of creating and sharing something meaningful. This realization gave her a sense of inner strength, a foundation that could withstand criticism or misunderstanding. One rainy afternoon, as she played alone in her room, she thought about the journey she had taken since the first forced performance. The fear and humiliation she had felt then seemed distant, replaced by a quiet pride and determination. She realized that the moment she had been pushed into the spotlight had revealed a strength she did not know she possessed. The experience had taught her that even under pressure, she could rise, express herself, and leave an impact on others. The girl understood that her music was more than just notes on a piano. It was a reflection of her life, a testament to her resilience, and a source of inspiration for those who listened. She knew that challenges would continue to arise, that not every performance would be met with admiration, and that life could be unpredictable and difficult. Yet she felt ready to face whatever came next, armed with the confidence that her talent, her dedication, and her honesty could carry her through. As she finished her practice that evening, she smiled softly to herself. The piano had become a companion, a teacher, and a friend. It had guided her through fear, revealed her hidden strengths, and connected her to the world in ways she had never imagined. She knew that this was only the beginning of her journey, and she was eager to see where her music would take her next. She felt a quiet sense of hope, a feeling that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she had the power to face them with courage, grace. In the beauty of her music, the girl's life began to change in ways she had never imagined. With each new performance, she felt herself growing braver and more confident. But she still approached every event with care. She remembered the fear she had felt the first time she was forced to play in front of strangers. And she knew that fear would never completely disappear. Instead, she learned to use it as energy, to let it push her toward better music and stronger expression. One afternoon, a local cultural center invited her to perform during a larger community gathering. This time the audience was bigger and the setting more formal. She felt her heart race as she entered the hall, the polished floor reflecting the stage lights. Children and adults filled the seats, chatting quietly as they waited for the program to begin. She could see curiosity on their faces, but also doubt, the same doubt she had faced at her first public performance. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that the music belonged to her, that the piano had become a place where she could tell her story without words. As she sat down, she glanced at the keys, and the memory of her previous performances gave her courage. The first notes came hesitantly, soft and cautious, as if testing the waters. But soon, her confidence returned, and her fingers began to move freely. The music grew stronger, richer, carrying the emotion she had stored inside for years. The audience fell silent, captivated by the depth and honesty of her playing. Each note seemed to tell a story of struggle, of hope, and of quiet triumph. Among the crowd were people who had never seen her before, who did not know her background. They listened with wide eyes, amazed that such beauty could come from a young girl with so little support. Some whispered to each other, sharing their surprise and admiration. Others sat quietly, moved in ways they could not explain. The girl did not notice them at first. She was lost in her music, each melody unfolding naturally, each rhythm expressing something deeper than words could describe. When the performance ended, there was a moment of stillness. The hall seemed to hold its breath before erupting into applause. The girl stood slowly, feeling a mix of exhaustion and pride. She realized that the music had carried her beyond fear, beyond hesitation, and into a space where she could truly connect with others. She had not just played, she had communicated her life, her experiences, and her resilience. After the event, several organizers approached her, offering praise and encouragement. They suggested she perform in larger venues, perhaps even outside the local community. Some offered to introduce her to music teachers and mentors who could help refine her skills. The girl listened quietly, considering the possibilities. She felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The idea of stepping into a bigger world was thrilling, but also intimidating. She was not sure if she was ready for that level of attention, and she wanted to be certain that her music would remain true to herself. That night, at home, she sat at her piano and reflected on the day. She realized that she had reached a point where her music was no longer just a private escape. It had become a bridge, connecting her to people who had never understood her life or her struggles. She felt a sense of responsibility, a quiet understanding that her talent could make a difference, inspire others. and bring hope where it was needed. In the weeks that followed, the girl continued to practice diligently. She experimented with different styles, blending classical elements with her own improvisations. She discovered that the more she explored, the more expressive and unique her music became. Her confidence grew not only in her playing but also in herself. She began to walk through her neighborhood with a subtle pride, aware that her gift was special and that it could open doors she had never imagined. One day, a reporter from a local newspaper came to interview her after hearing about her performances. She was nervous at first, unsure how to answer questions about her life and her music, but she found that speaking about her process and her passion came naturally. She explained how music had been a refuge during difficult times, how practicing in secret had helped her express feelings she could not put into words, and how performing had taught her courage. The reporter listened attentively, clearly impressed, and promised to share her story with the community. The article was published the following week, and soon more people began to take notice. Invitations to perform at schools, cultural events, and local celebrations increased. She faced each opportunity carefully, deciding where she felt comfortable and where she could truly share her music. She was no longer a child hiding her talent. She was becoming a recognized young musician with the ability to touch hearts through her playing. Despite the growing attention, she remained humble. She never let the praise or expectations change who she was. She practiced daily, refined her skills, and explored new ways to express herself. Her music remained a reflection of her life, honest and full of emotion. And she understood that her journey was just beginning. One evening, she was invited to perform at a small local festival. The crowd was larger than she had played for before, and the stage was brightly lit. As she walked on, she felt the familiar rush of fear mixed with anticipation. She remembered the first time she had been forced to play, shame and embarrassment, and she realized how far she had come. This time, she would play not because anyone forced her, but because she chose to, and because she wanted to share her music with others. She sat at the piano, closed her eyes, and let her hands find the keys. The first notes were delicate, soft, carrying a sense of calm and reflection. Then, gradually, the music grew more complex and expressive. Each melody told a story, each chord expressed emotion. The audience was silent, listening intently, moved by the beauty and sincerity of her playing. Some eyes glistened with tears, and some people whispered quietly, amazed at the depth of talent before them. As the performance continued, she felt a sense of freedom she had never known. The piano became an extension of herself, and the music flowed naturally, effortlessly, and powerfully. She was no longer defined by fear, by circumstance, or by the expectations of others. She was defined by her music, by the courage to play, by the truth she poured into each note. When the final chord faded, the audience erupted into applause. People stood, clapping and cheering, moved by the experience. The girl smiled softly, acknowledging the appreciation, but feeling a quiet pride in her own accomplishment. She realized that her journey was not just about performing or being recognized. It was about discovering her own strength, expressing herself honestly, touching the hearts of those who listened. In the days that followed, she reflected on how much her life had changed. The fear and hesitation that had once held her back were still there, but they had been transformed into determination and courage. She understood that every challenge, every moment of doubt, had contributed to her growth and to the power of her music. She was no longer a child afraid of the spotlight. She was a young artist finding her voice, one note at a time. Her reputation continued to grow, but she remained focused on the music itself. She explored new compositions, experimented with rhythms and harmonies, and sought ways to express deeper emotions. She realized that her music was not just a talent, but a responsibility to herself, to those who listened, and to the world that had started to notice her. Each performance became an opportunity to share a part of herself, to inspire, and to connect with others in ways words could not. Through all of this, she remained grounded. She remembered the small room where she had first discovered her gift, the quiet nights of practice, and the fear that had once paralyzed her. Those memories reminded her of where she came from, and of the importance of staying true to herself. The music was her anchor, her voice, and her shield, guiding her through every challenge and triumph. As she prepared for future performances, she carried with her the lessons she had learned. Courage comes from within. Talent must be nurtured, and honesty in expression touches hearts. She knew that her journey was far from over, but she felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. The girl had discovered the power of her music, the strength in her spirit, and the beauty of sharing her gift with the world. And she knew that this was only the beginning of a story that would continue to unfold. Note by note, day by day, with each new performance, the girl felt herself growing stronger, more confident, but also more aware of the responsibility her music carried. She had begun to see the effect her playing had on people, how it could move them, inspire them, and sometimes even change their perspective. She felt a quiet pride, not in being recognized, but in knowing that her music had the power to touch hearts in ways words could not. One day, she received an invitation to perform at a regional cultural festival. The event promised a much larger audience, including people from neighboring towns, local officials, and even music enthusiasts who had traveled to hear talented performers. She felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. This was bigger than anything she had experienced before, and the thought of standing on a stage with so many eyes watching made her heart race. Yet deep down, she knew she could do it. She had practiced, performed, and grown. The fear that had once paralyzed her was now a companion she could guide and control. The day of the festival arrived, and the girl stepped onto a large stage, her fingers trembling slightly as she approached the piano. The crowd was enormous, stretching out as far as she could see. Bright lights illuminated the stage, making it difficult to focus, but she closed her eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. She reminded herself that the music was hers, that it could tell her story, and that she could communicate without words. As she began to play, the first notes were gentle, careful, exploring the space, finding the resonance of the large hall. Slowly, she allowed herself to sink into the music, letting it flow freely. The audience grew quiet, drawn into the emotion and skill of her performance. She played with precision and feeling, weaving a story through each melody, each chord. The room seemed to hold its breath, listening, moved, and captivated by her talent. For the first time, she noticed people visibly reacting to her music. Some wiped away tears, some leaned forward in awe, and others whispered to each other, sharing their amazement. She realized that her gift was powerful, capable of touching the lives of people she had never met. It was a humbling, yet exhilarating feeling. She continued to play, letting her emotions guide her fingers. And for the first time, she felt completely at home on stage, as the final notes lingered in the air. The audience erupted into applause. It was louder, more sustained, and more heartfelt than anything she had experienced before. People were standing, clapping, cheering, and some were even calling out her name, though she had no public identity. She felt a wave of emotion, a mixture of gratitude, relief, and pride. She stood up slowly, acknowledging the crowd with a small, humble smile. She knew that this moment was not just about recognition, but about the connection she had created through music. After the performance, festival organizers and local officials approached her, expressing their admiration and encouraging her to continue sharing her gift. They offered opportunities for mentorship, further training, and even scholarships for advanced music education. The girl listened quietly, taking in their words. She felt honored, but also cautious. She wanted to grow and explore her talent, but she wanted to do so on her own terms. She had learned that her music was deeply personal, and she did not want it to be shaped by pressure or expectation. At home that evening, she reflected on the day. She thought about the journey she had taken from being a quiet, unnoticed girl to someone who could captivate a large audience. The path had not been easy. There had been fear, doubt, and hesitation. There had been moments when she wanted to turn away, when the weight of expectation felt too heavy. But each challenge had made her stronger. Each performance had taught her more about herself, and each note had carried her closer to the person she was becoming in the following weeks. She continued to perform at smaller events, balancing her growing public presence with private practice. She experimented with new compositions, blending techniques she had learned from listening to others with her own natural style. She began to understand the nuances of performance, how to pace a piece, how to express emotion through dynamics and tempo, and how to create a connection with the audience. Without losing herself in their expectations, the girl also began to mentor younger children in her neighborhood. She shared her love of music and taught them simple melodies, showing them that music could be a way to express feelings, to find joy, and to build confidence. Through teaching, she discovered a new layer of satisfaction and fulfillment. She realized that her talent was not just for herself, but also for inspiring others and helping them discover their own potential. While practicing a new composition, she paused and reflected on how far she had come. She remembered the first time she had been forced to play, the shame and fear she had felt, and the unexpected beauty that emerged from that moment. She realized that what had seemed like a punishment had actually been a turning point, a moment that revealed her hidden strength and talent. The music had carried her through fear, and she had emerged not broken, but empowered. The girl's performances began to attract attention from local media. Articles and interviews highlighted her talent, her dedication, and her journey. People were inspired by her story, and she became a symbol of resilience and hope in her community. She remained humble, however, focusing on the music rather than the recognition. She understood that the true value of her gift lay in the joy and connection it brought, not in fame or applause. Despite her growing reputation, she faced moments of doubt. There were times when she wondered if she could continue to meet expectations, if she could maintain the honesty and emotion in her playing. But each time she sat at the piano, she reminded herself why she played: to express herself, to share her story, and to connect with others. The music became a source of strength, a constant reminder of her resilience and her ability to rise above challenges. During one particularly important festival, she performed a piece she had composed herself, reflecting her journey and emotions. The audience was deeply moved, many visibly touched by the depth and beauty of the music. After the performance, people approached her, expressing admiration and gratitude. Some shared their own stories of struggle and hope, telling her how her music had inspired them. The girl listened, humbled and deeply affected. She realized that her gift had the power to create change, to offer comfort, and to inspire courage in others. At home, she continued to practice and compose, exploring new melodies and experimenting with different styles. She learned to balance her growing public presence with private reflection, understanding that the music was not just about performance, but also about personal growth and expression. She discovered that the act of creating music, of pouring her emotions into each note, was as rewarding as the applause and recognition she received. The girl also began to dream of larger possibilities. She imagined performing in bigger venues, collaborating with other musicians, and sharing her music with audiences beyond her community. Yet she remained grounded, aware that talent alone was not enough. Dedication, practice, and honesty were equally important, and she committed herself to continue growing as both a musician and a person. Through all of these experiences, she maintained a quiet strength. She remembered the fear and humiliation of her first forced performance, as she understood that those moments had shaped her resilience and determination. She had learned to face fear, to embrace challenges, and to use her music as a tool for expression and connection. The journey had been difficult, but it had revealed her inner strength and the depth of her talent as she prepared for future performances. She carried with her the lessons she had learned: courage, humility, dedication, and the power of honest expression. She knew that her music could touch hearts, inspire hope, and create meaningful connections. She also knew that her journey was far from over, that there would be more challenges to face and more opportunities to grow. But she felt ready, confident in her abilities, and committed to continuing her path with grace, authenticity, and the beauty of her music. The girl understood that her talent was a gift, one that she had discovered through perseverance and courage. She had transformed fear into strength, hesitation into expression, and solitude into connection. Her music had become a bridge between her inner world and the hearts of those who listened, a testament to her resilience and the power of human expression, and she knew that no matter what lay ahead, she would continue to play, to grow, to share her gift with the world. The girl had come a long way since that first time she was forced to play. Each performance, each note, had shaped her into a young musician with confidence, skill, and a deep understanding of her own emotions. She had learned to turn fear into energy, hesitation into expression, and private practice into public connection. Her music had become more than talent. It was a reflection of her life, her resilience, and the power she held within herself. Word of her talent had spread beyond her local community. Invitations arrived from towns farther away, from schools, cultural centers, and music organizations. She felt a mixture of excitement and caution. She wanted to embrace these opportunities, but she also wanted to stay true to herself. The fear of losing authenticity or being pushed too far was still present. But she had learned to trust her instincts, to know when to step forward and when to step back. Her journey had taught her that her music was hers first, and the world could listen, admire, and be touched. But it could not dictate who she was. One day, she received an invitation to perform at a regional youth music festival. This event promised a larger stage, more lights, and a more diverse audience than she had ever faced. She felt her heart race as she walked into the hall, her fingers brushing the keys of the grand piano. The room was filled with students, teachers, families, and music lovers, all waiting for the next performance. She felt the familiar tension in her chest. But she reminded herself that she was not the same girl who had been forced to play before. She was a musician in control of her own art, ready to share it with the world. As she began to play, the first notes were soft, careful, exploring the hall and finding the sound she wanted. Slowly, she let herself sink into the music, letting her emotions guide her fingers. The audience became quiet, leaning in, captivated by the depth and sincerity of her performance. Each melody carried her story, the struggles, the nights of practice, the small moments of joy, and the resilience she had built over the years. She played with precision but also with freedom, letting her heart speak through the keys. The audience was moved in ways she could feel but not see completely. Some eyes glistened with tears, others were wide with amazement. People whispered to each other, sharing their surprise at the beauty and emotion of her playing. She felt a connection forming, a silent bond between her music and the hearts listening. For the first time, she truly understood the power of her gift, how it could transcend fear, time, and circumstance, touching people in a way that words never could. After the performance, people came forward to congratulate her. Some wanted to know how she learned, how she had practiced, and what inspired her music. She answered humbly, sharing pieces of her story, but always returning to the music itself. She understood that the heart of her talent lay not in praise or recognition, but in the honesty and emotion she put into every note. The experience reinforced her belief that music was a bridge, a way to connect with others, to communicate without words, and to inspire hope and courage. In the days that followed, she continued to practice and compose. She experimented with new melodies, created new arrangements, and explored different styles. She began to keep a journal of her compositions, writing down her ideas, the feelings behind them, and how she imagined them sounding. She understood that her music was evolving with her, becoming richer, deeper, and more expressive as she grew. Each new piece was a reflection of her experiences, a testament to her journey, a gift she could share with others. The girl also began to notice the impact she had on the younger children in her community. They watched her with curiosity and admiration, eager to learn and inspired by her dedication. She took time to teach them, showing simple techniques and encouraging them to explore their own creativity. Through mentoring, she discovered a new joy, helping others find their own voice, just as she had found hers. She understood that her talent was not just for herself, but could also empower others, giving them confidence, inspiration, and hope. One afternoon, a well-known music teacher visited her to hear her play. The teacher had heard about her growing reputation and wanted to see the talent that had captivated so many people. The girl was nervous at first, unsure how she would be judged. But as she played, she felt the music flow naturally, expressing her emotions, her experiences, and her dedication. The teacher listened intently, clearly impressed, and offered guidance to help her refine her skills, encouraging her to explore her creativity even further. The girl listened carefully, grateful for the advice, but always mindful that her music had to remain true to herself. As her opportunities grew, she began to face new challenges. Larger audiences, higher expectations, and the pressure to perform well could have been intimidating. But she had learned to focus on the music, on the connection it created, and on the honesty of her expression. She discovered that preparation, dedication, and self-awareness were as important as talent. She learned to balance ambition with authenticity, understanding that her gift was most powerful when it reflected her true self. One evening, she performed at a citywide cultural event. The stage was enormous, the lights bright, and the crowd vast. She felt the familiar rush of nerves, but she remembered her past experiences and the courage they had built in her. She approached the piano with a sense of calm determination, knowing that the music would guide her, as it always had. She played with emotion, skill, and freedom, letting each note convey her journey, her struggles, her triumphs, and her hope. The audience was silent, enraptured, and when the final chord faded, they erupted into applause, cheering and clapping, moved by the depth and beauty of her music.